Cleveland has burned through quarterbacks like draft picks don't matter. Decades of hope, decades of resets. But now, reports suggest the Browns may have finally chosen their guy in Shedeur Sanders, not just for this season but for the future. The real question, are they ready to stand by it? Cleveland doesn't just have a quarterback problem, it has a quarterback history, and not the kind you celebrate. Since returning to the league in 1999, the Cleveland Browns have become synonymous with instability under center. Jersey after jersey, promise after promise, reset after reset. What should have been the most important position in football turned into a revolving door that never stopped spinning. It started with high expectations and early disappointment. Tim Couch was supposed to be the answer. He was. Brandon Weeden arrived older and pro-ready. That experiment collapsed quickly. Then came Johnny Manziel, hype, headlines, and a short-lived tenure that raised more eyebrows than wins. Even Baker Mayfield, who briefly reignited belief and delivered a long-awaited playoff victory, eventually became part of the cycle when tensions rose and direction shifted. And then there was the Deshaun Watson gamble, a fully guaranteed contract that shocked the league. Massive financial commitment, massive expectations, but inconsistency, injuries, and controversy left the organization facing familiar questions again, not just about performance, but about judgment. That's what makes this moment so risky. Because it's not just about talent evaluation anymore, it's about credibility. Every time the Browns have believed they found the guy, it unraveled, sometimes because of poor development, sometimes because of front office impatience, sometimes because the pressure inside the AFC North simply swallowed them whole. Look at the division. The Baltimore Ravens built long-term stability around Lamar Jackson. The Cincinnati Bengals committed to Joe Burrow and reshaped their identity overnight. The Pittsburgh Steelers, regardless of roster transitions, have maintained cultural consistency that Cleveland has struggled to match. In that environment, mistakes don't just hurt, they echo. Drafting or committing to a young quarterback in Cleveland isn't like doing it in a stable system. It comes with historical baggage. Fans don't just evaluate the player, they brace for the collapse. Analysts don't just analyze mechanics, they question the organization's ability to develop. That's the shadow hanging over this decision. If Shedeur Sanders becomes the next chapter in the Browns' quarterback saga, it won't be judged in isolation. It will be measured against decades of misfires, against financial gambles, against playoff droughts, against division rivals who figured it out. Which raises the real concern. Is this finally a calculated, patient investment? Or are we watching another hopeful beginning that Cleveland isn't structurally prepared to sustain? Because in this city, the talent isn't always the problem. The cycle is. What changed wasn't a press conference, it wasn't a headline, it wasn't even an official announcement. It was a performance, the kind that forces a franchise to pause and quietly reconsider everything. When Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field in that breakout stretch, the energy felt different. Not flashy, not desperate, controlled, calculated, confident, and in Cleveland, confidence at quarterback hasn't always lasted long. The stat line immediately grabbed attention. Over 350 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, tight window throws layered between defenders, a deep ball that dropped perfectly over coverage. But the numbers only told part of the story. What really stood out was command. He wasn't just reacting to the defense, he was manipulating it. Pre-snap adjustments, calm hand signals at the line, audible changes that shifted protection when pressure disguised itself late. Those are veteran traits. That's not something you expect to see consistently from a young quarterback still adjusting to NFL speed. And it wasn't just one drive. Late in the fourth quarter, with the pocket collapsing and momentum starting to tilt, he didn't panic. He stepped up, eyes downfield, delivered a strike on 3rd and long that silenced the crowd and reset the tone. That's the type of throw coaches replay in meetings, the type of moment that builds trust inside a locker room. Because teammates notice. Reports from inside the building suggested veterans were responding differently. Offensive linemen praised his communication. Receivers talked about timing and anticipation. Even defensive players reportedly admitted that practices felt sharper when he was commanding the huddle. That kind of buy-in doesn't happen automatically. But not everyone was ready to crown him. Some analysts pointed out the sample size. One strong stretch doesn't erase the learning curve. Defensive coordinators adjust quickly in this league. Film spreads fast. The real test, critics argued, comes after opponents gather tape and start attacking tendencies. That skepticism wasn't unfair. Still, there's something about poise that can't be manufactured. You either have it in high-pressure moments or you don't. And during that stretch, he had it. The pocket didn't speed him up. The noise didn't rattle him. The expectations didn't overwhelm him. For a franchise like the Cleveland Browns, that matters more than a highlight reel. Because talent has passed through Cleveland before. Strong arms, athletic traits, first-round pedigrees, what they lacked was sustained command, the ability to make everyone else settle down. That performance didn't just raise eyebrows. It shifted internal conversations. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether he could start. It was whether the organization had just found the foundation it's been chasing for decades. Ownership decisions don't usually trend on social media. They don't throw touchdowns, they don't call plays, but in Cleveland, ownership has shaped the quarterback story more than anyone wants to admit. And that brings everything back to Jimmy Haslam. Haslam has never been passive. Since purchasing the Cleveland Browns, he's shown a willingness to act boldly, sometimes aggressively. Coaching changes, front office restructures, major financial commitments. When he believes in a direction, he doesn't hesitate to push forward. We saw that with the Deshaun Watson contract, a fully guaranteed deal that stunned executives across the league. It wasn't cautious, it wasn't conventional, it was a declaration Cleveland was done playing small. But bold moves come with consequences. When that gamble didn't immediately stabilize the franchise, questions quietly resurfaced. Not just about the quarterback, but about organizational patience. Would ownership double down? Would they pivot again? Or would they finally commit to a long-term developmental path? Now, reports suggest Haslam may be ready to make another defining decision, this time centered around Shedeur Sanders. To be clear, nothing official has been declared. But insiders claim there's growing belief that ownership views him as more than a short-term spark, more than a temporary fix. If true, that changes everything. Because when an owner signals commitment, it reshapes the building. Front office timelines shift, coaching evaluations adjust, cap strategy aligns with the quarterback's window. It becomes less about surviving the season and more about constructing a future. And financially, the timing matters. A young quarterback on a manageable contract provides flexibility. It allows a general manager to reinforce the roster, to invest in protection, to secure weapons, to build a defense that complements offensive growth. But here, where it gets complicated. Haslam's history suggests urgency. Cleveland's history suggests impatience. And the AFC North offers no grace period. If adversity hits, a rough stretch, defensive adjustments, rookie mistakes, will ownership stay the course, or will the pressure to win immediately resurface? Some league observers believe this moment feels different. They argue Haslam understands that constant resets have cost the franchise more than temporary growing pains ever could. Others remain skeptical, pointing to past pivots as evidence that stability in Cleveland is fragile. That's the gamble. It's not just betting on talent. It's betting on patience. And in a city that has seen bold decisions backfire before, this one may define the franchise's next decade, for better or worse. While headlines focused on the quarterback, something quieter was happening behind the scenes. No dramatic press conferences, no flashy declarations, just calculated moves, and at the center of it all was Andrew Berry. Berry has never been the loudest executive in the league. He doesn't leak bold predictions. He doesn't chase attention. But if you look closely at the roster decisions over the past stretch, a pattern starts to emerge and it feels intentional. When a franchise truly believes it has found its quarterback, everything shifts. You stop building just in case. You stop hedging bets. You start aligning timelines. Some veterans who didn't quite fit the long-term window quietly moved on, depth pieces were adjusted, contracts were structured differently. Cap flexibility suddenly mattered more than short-term splashes. That's not random, that's strategic. Because once a young quarterback becomes the centerpiece, the blueprint changes. Protection becomes priority number one. Interior offensive line stability isn't optional, it's survival. Receiver rooms aren't just about big names, they're about reliability, route precision, and chemistry. Tight ends who can block and leak out become weapons instead of afterthoughts. And then there's the defense. Barry understands that a developing quarterback doesn't need weekly shootouts. He needs leads. He needs a pass rush that closes games. He needs a secondary that forces opponents to press. Building a complementary defense buys time, it lowers pressure, it allows growth without chaos. Look at recent league examples. The Kansas City Chiefs fully committed to Patrick Mahomes and then tailored everything around him: speed, protection, play design. The Buffalo Bills reshaped their identity once they believed in Josh Allen, adding pieces that amplified his strengths instead of forcing him into rigid structure. That's what real commitment looks like. And while Cleveland hasn't publicly declared anything definitive, the roster construction hints at direction. Fewer temporary patches, more foundational planning, draft capital preserved instead of burned, financial discipline replacing desperation. Some insiders suggest Barry has been quietly preparing for this transition for months, not reacting, anticipating. If ownership signals long-term belief in Shedeur Sanders, the groundwork may already be in place. But here where it gets interesting. This isn't just about adding talent, it's about culture. Quarterbacks shape locker rooms, and general managers shape what that locker room values. If Barry is aligning personalities, trimming distractions, and prioritizing leadership traits, that signals something bigger than scheme adjustments. It signals a reset of identity. Of course, none of this guarantees success. Plenty of well-constructed rosters have collapsed under pressure. Plenty of promising timelines have been derailed by injuries or impatience. But when the front office stops operating year to year and starts thinking 5 years ahead, you can feel the difference. The silence isn't inactivity. It's preparation. And if this truly is Cleveland's long-term pivot at quarterback, Andrew Barry's subtle roster shift might be the most important move no one is talking about. There's another layer to this story that makes league executives uneasy, and it has nothing to do with arm strength or footwork. It's the shadow of Deion Sanders. Whether people admit it or not, Shedeur Sanders doesn't enter the league like a typical young quarterback. He enters with a spotlight already attached. Cameras follow him, debates surround him, opinions form faster, and much of that traces back to his father's larger-than-life presence. Deion isn't just a former player, he's a Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, a headline generator. When he speaks, networks amplify it. When he posts, it trends. That kind of visibility can be a weapon or a distraction. Some fans believe it's an advantage. They argue Shedeur has been prepared for pressure his entire life. He's handled media scrutiny since high school. He's played under national broadcasts in college. He's faced critics who claimed his opportunities were handed to him only to respond with production. To them, the spotlight isn't heavy, it's normal. But others around the league remain cautious. There's a quiet skepticism that follows quarterbacks with strong external branding. Fair or not, some executives question whether the noise ever fully fades. They wonder if every coaching decision will be dissected through a Deion lens, if every benching, even temporary, would explode into a national debate, if every offensive struggle would trigger commentary from outside the building. That tension isn't imaginary. Rumors suggest some within NFL circles have privately asked, can a young quarterback truly separate himself from a powerful parental presence, or does that dynamic inevitably shape perception inside the locker room? To be clear, there's no verified conflict, no confirmed interference. In fact, Shedeur has consistently emphasized his independence. He's publicly stated that once he steps into a professional locker room, it's his career, his accountability, his responsibility. And teammates reportedly respect that. But perception in the NFL can be as influential as reality. Opposing fans already frame him as a brand-first quarterback. Critics on television debate whether hype has inflated expectations. Some analysts suggest that his development will be judged more harshly precisely because of his last name. Yet there's another side to this. Deion's influence may actually insulate him. Few young quarterbacks understand media pressure better. Few have been taught confidence, composure, and presentation at that level. Few have seen firsthand how to command a room. If anything, that upbringing could create emotional durability, something Cleveland has desperately needed at quarterback. Because in this market, noise gets loud quickly. If adversity hits, a 2-interception game, a late collapse, a divisional loss, the conversation won't stay quiet. The AFC North doesn't allow quiet, and the presence of a high-profile father could either amplify tension or provide guidance. That's the unknown. Is the day-in factor external pressure waiting to ignite? Or is it a built-in support system that most young quarterbacks never have? The truth probably lives somewhere in the middle. But one thing is certain, Shedeur Sanders won't experience anonymity. Every throw will be analyzed, every quote dissected, every sideline moment clipped and replayed. For some players, that's overwhelming. For others, it's fuel. And if Cleveland is truly committing to him as their future, they aren't just investing in talent. They're embracing the spotlight that comes with it, ready or not. For years, the energy inside Cleveland felt cautious. Even when the Cleveland Browns were competitive, there was always a layer of hesitation. Fans have been through too much to fully buy in too quickly. They've seen promising starts fade. They've seen hype collapse. So when optimism begins to build, it usually comes with a protective shield. But something shifted recently. It wasn't just about wins or losses, it was about atmosphere. When Shedeur Sanders stepped into a larger role, the buzz felt different. Ticket resale prices reportedly ticked upward for games he was expected to start. Pre-game shows spent more time discussing Cleveland than usual. National commentators who once treated the Browns as an afterthought suddenly framed them as intriguing. That doesn't happen quietly. On social media, engagement surged, highlight clips circulated faster, fan pages that had grown cynical over the years started posting cautious optimism instead of sarcasm. Is this finally it? Became a common theme, not declarations, questions, hope wrapped in restraint. And that restraint is important. Cleveland fans don't overreact blindly anymore. They've learned. They analyze mechanics. They debate play calling. They watch body language on the sideline. When excitement builds here, it's usually earned. Merchandise chatter began surfacing too. While official numbers aren't publicly detailed in real time, local retailers reportedly saw increased demand tied to the quarterback position. Jerseys matter in this city. They're symbolic, and fans don't rush to buy them unless they feel a player might actually stick. But the energy wasn't just external. Inside the stadium, the reaction to big throws felt louder. Third down conversions carried weight. Even incomplete passes that showed confidence drew applause. That's subtle but meaningful. It signals belief forming in real time. Of course, hype is fragile. There were games where momentum stalled, drives that fizzled, defensive breakdowns that overshadowed offensive flashes, and in those moments you could almost feel the collective anxiety creeping back in, not anger, fear of history repeating itself. Because Cleveland has experienced false dawns before. The difference this time, according to some fans, is composure. Even in tough stretches, there wasn't visible panic at quarterback. Body language stayed steady, post-game interviews stayed measured. That steadiness resonates with a fanbase tired of emotional roller coasters. Nationally, conversation followed. Debate shows began asking whether the Browns might finally have direction. Analysts who previously questioned the franchise's long-term plans started discussing potential playoff paths if development continues. It wasn't unanimous praise, far from it, but it was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement matters in Cleveland. Primetime scheduling speculation even surfaced in online discussions. If the momentum continues, could the league flex more games into national windows? Could the Browns shift from regional storyline to broader headline? Those questions alone mark a shift. But there's another side to fan energy, expectation. Once belief sets in, patience shrinks. A promising rookie season can quickly turn into playoff demands. A solid performance can turn into he must outplay division rivals. And in the AFC North, facing quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, comparisons are unavoidable. That's where things get delicate. If adversity hits, will the fanbase stay steady, or will old frustrations resurface? Cleveland supporters are passionate, loyal, and deeply invested. They'll defend their quarterback fiercely until doubt creeps in. That emotional swing is part of what makes this market intense. Right now, though, the arrow points upward. The cynicism hasn't disappeared, but it's softened. Conversations feel hopeful instead of exhausted. For a franchise that has battled quarterback instability for decades, that emotional shift alone is significant. Because before championships, before playoff runs, before division titles, there has to be belief. And for the first time in a long time, belief inside Cleveland doesn't feel forced. It feels possible. For decades, Cleveland Browns fans have lived with uncertainty. Every new quarterback brought a flicker of hope that quickly faded. Franchise quarterbacks seemed like mirages, draft picks that never panned out, veterans who promised leadership but delivered inconsistency, and hopeful rookies swallowed by pressure. The energy in the city has always reflected this roller coaster: cautious optimism, followed by skepticism, then frustration. But recently, something feels different, and the question on everyone's mind is clear. Is this stability or just another cycle of hope and disappointment? Enter Shedeur Sanders. From the moment he stepped into a larger role with the Browns, the subtle shifts were noticeable. Ticket prices for games he was expected to start surged. Social media chatter, usually filled with sarcasm and skepticism, began carrying a tone of cautious optimism. Local barbershops, sports bars, and online forums buzzed with a recurring question: could this finally be it? The energy isn't blind excitement, it's measured hope, the kind of hope that only builds when performance earns attention. Inside the stadium, the change is tangible. Fans react differently to big plays. Third down conversions feel more important. Even incomplete passes that demonstrate confidence draw applause. There's a shared understanding forming: this quarterback is not just another body under center, he's influencing the tone of the game and the mood of the crowd. The old frustration, a fan base numbed by repeated failures, is giving way to belief. It's subtle, yet profound. The composure Shedeur Sanders shows in high-pressure situations has been critical to this shift. When the pocket collapses, when the crowd rises in tension, when playoff implications are looming, his body language remains steady. Post-game interviews show measured communication, not empty bravado. That steadiness spreads through the team. Offensive linemen fight harder, receivers finish routes with more precision, and defensive players play with added urgency, knowing the offense is in capable hands. This isn't just about individual performance, it's about cultural stability forming organically. National conversations have started reflecting this change. Analysts who once dismissed Cleveland as directionless now question whether the franchise might finally have clarity. Discussions about primetime scheduling, national exposure, and playoff viability have entered the narrative. The league is noticing. And while this attention is important, the real transformation lies in how fans perceive their own team. For a city accustomed to heartbreak and fleeting hope, belief is now tangible. Jerseys are selling, social engagement is climbing, and conversations around Cleveland are no longer defensive, they're anticipatory. Yet the question remains: is this true stability or another cycle of transient hope? Cleveland supporters are passionate but discerning. They remember every false dawn. Any dip in performance or momentum could quickly reignite skepticism. The difference now is the consistency and poise that Sanders brings. His preparation, film study, practice habits, locker room leadership is intentional. He's not a player being carried by hype. He's actively shaping the environment around him. Every snap is a chance to build credibility, every drive a chance to reinforce belief. Ownership and management alignment reinforces this momentum. Jimmy Haslam's decision to fully commit to Sanders, coupled with Andrew Barry's roster adjustments, signals that this is not a trial period, it's a franchise-defining investment. Resources are being allocated to complement his skill set, strengthen team cohesion, and create sustainable success. That organizational confidence echoes in the stands. Fans can feel it, players can feel it. Momentum is building from the inside out. Cleveland is no stranger to fleeting promise, but there's an unmistakable difference in energy right now. The city isn't just hopeful, it's engaged. The team isn't scrambling, it's building. And the quarterback at the center of it all isn't merely talented. He's demonstrating leadership, consistency, and poise under pressure. The transformation may not be complete, but the trajectory is clear. The question is no longer whether Cleveland can hope, it's whether the belief they feel can translate into sustained success. The real test lies ahead. Games will be won and lost, adversity will arrive, and skeptics will watch for cracks. But if Shedeur Sanders continues to lead with the same preparation, poise, and impact he has shown so far, this cycle of hope may finally solidify into something Cleveland has longed for: genuine stability, long-term confidence, and a team that fans can believe in without reservation. This is the moment for Cleveland to watch, engage, and evaluate, because for the first time in decades, it feels like the Browns aren't just hopping, they're building.